Corporation or any of its subsidiary companies. Attorney Nathaniel Lee, a lawyer with credibility, success, and experience. Representing people in hundreds of jury trials, Nathaniel Lee is who you want by your side in the courtroom. You've seen the rest, now hire the best. Contact Lee, Cosell, and Feigley today. And now, to address the legal concerns of the community, Praise AM 1310, 95.1 FM presents Legally Speaking. Today's host.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We have our superstar panel, Attorney Vanita Banks and Marlon Primes. And we have to start on somewhat of a sad note. My thoughts and prayers are to the folks down in Jamaica. I had the privilege of visiting that country a couple of times last year, and the human suffering is just so extraordinarily bad, based on the fact that it appears to be a lack of sufficient resources, and the country is just decimated. I've never seen a hurricane so bad, cause so much destruction. And it was just terrible watching that, because we were down there last year a couple of times, and I suspect that it would take 5 to 7 years for Jamaica to somehow recover, at least in part. So hopefully things get better. But in our country, we got to start off with the self-inflicted wound to our economy. And we're going to start off talking about the legal issues surrounding the SNAP program for food stamps and things like that. We're in a crisis situation. And we'll start off with Attorney Banks, because she has a lot of insight. She's in Chicago. And I'm concerned about this, Attorney Banks. This SNAP program, food stamps, so many people rely on this, and everybody think that it's a program for a lot of African Americans, which is not true. You know, we know the majority of people that get these benefits, but it's important. I mean, I've been in a lot of grocery stores, and I've talked to people, and they're getting these benefits, and they don't get enough money to feed their family for the whole month anyway with these benefits. But based upon the high cost of goods now, when you go grocery shopping, it's just, the pricing is just out of control now. And so what's going to happen to these folks?
Good morning,
Morning.
Attorney Lee and Primes, and thank you for having me. And my thoughts and prayers also go out to the people of Jamaica whose that hurricane was worse than it seemed Hurricane Katrina, and just wreaked devastating damage on Jamaica. And I'm hoping that during this call, I can provide some information regarding where donations can be sent. I would suggest that they be sent through the Red Cross. So hopefully on this call, I can put on in the chat box some information regarding where donations can be sent. So anything that our calling audience can do to assist and support our people in Jamaica would be just so helpful. With respect to here in the United States, where you would think that in the best country or the greatest country in the world, that no one in this country should be threatened to go hungry. But we know that there is tremendous food insecurity in the United States, and that occurred prior to this latest government shutdown, which as of today, I'm not sure whether or not the funds that two courts, one in Rhode Island and the other one in, was it Massachusetts, ruled that the SNAP funds should be released. But I'm not sure that that's happened, because those orders came down just on Friday. But we were talking with, before the show, Attorney Primes was reminding us that food insecurity, particularly in neighborhoods and communities of color and in rural communities, existed prior to this latest crisis that we are experiencing, there are food deserts across this nation. And so this latest crisis is just piling on to that. We also know that, unfortunately, 1 in 8 families suffer from food insecurity in the United States. And so I'm just going to move to Chicago right now, or Illinois, and where Chicago residents can reach out for food. As you know, many churches, they have food pantries, and there is a organization as well, the Chicago Food Depository. There's another organization called We Got You Illinois, and a national organization entitled Feeding America. You go to that website, you enter your zip code to find nearby food banks. And here in Illinois, in the Chicagoland area, Attorney Primes and Lee, people are coming together to churches, civic and social organizations and nonprofits and others are coming together to meet this need on behalf of the citizens of Illinois.
What's the status in Cleveland?
Well, good morning, everyone, and good morning, Attorney Lee and Attorney Banks. Certainly, my heart and prayers also go out to the people of Jamaica, and we have a large population of Jamaican Americans in Cleveland and other parts of the country. One of the things I just want to mention real briefly is that a lot of the things that we talk about here, they're connected. There's a USAID, aid, U.S. Agency for International Development. This is an organization that's been substantially pared down, and what they would do in times of emergency, especially international emergency, they would position staff to provide resources in terms of emergency food, plastic sheeting, to recover housing that's been damage. And a lot of that has been cut back in this administration. So, we do need to work through our elected representatives and let them know that, hey, this is important. Now, in terms of the issue of, SNAP benefits, it's certainly a challenge in Ohio, as in other parts of the country. Our governor, who is a moderate Republican, has, put vehicles in place so that there's aid going to food banks in Cleveland and other parts of the state of Ohio, which is a good thing. But it's really important to note that aid and assistance to food banks, it can't replace the SNAP benefits. As Attorney Banks indicated, this has a significant impact, especially on communities of color. And, it's really important for the listeners to really understand that the social safety net that was created under LBJ is really important. And it's really disheartening to hear, African Americans, particularly, talk and down talk, this social safety net. It's important. There's no one that can predict, what's going to happen in your life. There should be a social safety net. So that's another thing that we really need to push for, in addition to providing information to people about, where they can get alternative food. We need to really exercise our political power and let people know that this is important. The other thing I'll say, and the final thing, is that, SNAP benefits are not only important for those that, are of modest means, but, many, stores in, African American and communities of color, a significant amount of their resources come from food stamps and SNAP benefits, your Walmarts, your corner stores. And so, you're right that this is going to have an impact on their bottom line and may create even more food deserts, which has health consequences for our young people. We have 39% that are on food stamps or SNAP benefits. And so they're not getting those benefits. They're not going to be able to develop. It's going to have a wide, lasting impact.
Well, there's so much misinformation about these programs. The one thing I want to clarify to all our listeners is that these federal programs, the one thing that some racist themes have been developed, that somehow these government benefits go to illegal immigrants. That's a lie. During the pandemic is a good example. And downtown Indianapolis, we had a lot of immigrants doing the janitorial work, the hard work, cleaning the toilets and things like that, making our environment sanitary and safe. They had to keep working because they did not get unemployment benefit. They didn't get any of these government benefits. And I think most people were under the misconception that they did. At the same time, they paid the same taxes that we paid under like a 99 tax ID number, but they don't get Social Security or any retirement benefits from the United States government, although they pay into the system. They get nothing back. So the fact that people still have this conception is just wrong. So if you have anybody talk about this, always correct them because they get no benefits. But the primary problem is this: the food costs, at least in my orbit, I try to shop once a week to get groceries. And I ran into some shocking things this week, Vanita and Marlon. I wanted to, once a month, I like to buy a steak or two. That's about it. And to my surprise, I went to buy steaks that last year, I looked at my picture, it cost me between $37 and $42 at Costco to buy these ribeye. This week, it was between $87 and $94 for the same ribeyes. And it didn't just, it was just shocking to me that the price had more than doubled in 1 year. And the reason that's important, if you receive the SNAP benefits or food stamps or whatever term they use in your area, the amount of money that the families are getting per person is relatively modest. So the money that they're receiving in these food stamps is not enough really to give them groceries for the whole month to start with. Now, where is the largest areas where people use food stamp? Answer is real simple. Go to any of the Republican-controlled states, and that's the highest percentage of food stamp recipients. Like Mississippi, these are the poor states that's run by Republicans, and somehow they've convinced their citizen that you're doing great, even though you're like last in every statistical categories. They did a comparison between Massachusetts and Oklahoma. The two states that every county, one voted Democrat, one county voted Republican. They were showing that in every category, Massachusetts was first and second education of students, wealth, you name it, and they had progressive policy, whereas Oklahoma had regressive policies, and they were dead last in most statistical categories. So the point I'm making is, when people are lambasting the idea of these benefits, I want you to stand your ground, and we need to be a defender of this. I'm not sure what we're doing in our state to address this problem. It seems like that our current government structure is more concerned about eliminating voting rights for minorities than anything else. And this is a critical issue, and I don't want to go by the wayside. We have to stand up for the less fortunate folks in our society. But you never know. One day you may be one of those persons that needs some assistance, and it won't be there. Now, the other issue is that if you look at our chat room, Attorney Banks have put in information as to how you get food. And she said, go to Feed America website and enter your zip code for food banks, and they will give you information concerning where you can find that. Also, if you are in the Indianapolis area, if you just simply type in Google food assistance in Indianapolis or Indiana, and they give you all the places that are giving away food. But By the same token, Anita, Marlon, I don't believe that this this method of what they're trying to do with people providing assistance solves the problem. It's a band-aid until a mass bleeding process. It won't solve the problem because I think just giving people these small sums of food is not going to be enough to maintain. Plus the fact that it's a matter of resource. I mean, where do you get the resources to continue to try to feed everybody that used to be fed on these government benefits? And there's a large percentage of folks that actually need this in order to survive.
And that's so true, Attorney Lee. In fact, Governor Pritzker's strategy in signing an executive order a couple days ago was to allocate $20 million to food banks. And so that's going to help, but it's not going to actually solve the problem. As you said, it's a band-aid in this interim period. In Illinois, 1.9 million Illinois residents receive food stamps through a SNAP. And so even when the government reopens and those benefits resume, the funding for SNAP was reduced in the big ugly bill budget legislation. And so this is the first time in the history, and it's a 60-year history, that benefits have been shut off during a government shutdown. And there is about $5 billion that was set aside by the federal government for SNAP as a contingency for situations just like this. But then those benefits have not been released by the Department of Agriculture as they well should be. And there needs to be an outcry across Congress because, again, those benefits have already been allocated, and this should not be a partisan issue. Unfortunately, however, it is.
Yeah, well, there's a really dichotomy here if you really look at it. Congress, we have three branches of government, and Congress, Attorney Banks is absolutely correct, appropriated money to be used in these emergencies. And that's what these federal court cases were about in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. And one of the judges said, well, hey, if this is not an emergency in terms of, people not having food, then what is? And basically, was saying that, hey, there needed to be a plan come Monday by the administration as to, what plan they're going to, implement to use these emergency funds. But the interesting dichotomy is that many of your listeners may not know at the time that there has been, not a full-throated response by the administration to make sure Americans with food insecurity are getting their SNAP benefits. At the same time, this administration has given how much to Argentina? $20 billion. And the reason given for giving Argentina $20 billion was that this is a conservative administration, kind of a clone of our current president, and their economy was collapsing, and they were using this as a vehicle to prop up, an ally. So on one hand, if you're giving $20 billion to failed policies in a foreign country, but yet you're slow walking, providing benefits to those in need in America, I mean, that's pretty, concerning. And it's really important that our leaders, we voice those concerns, and that our leaders voice those concerns, because these are our taxpayer monies. And, we should have a say in terms of how they're used.
Counsel, one of the things that we're seeing is a massive, and then we'll switch over to the ICE issue, a massive amount of litigation against the federal government. As of today, the Trump administration has 233 active cases challenging the Trump administration action, 233 filed all over the country. And then you also have just a week ago, it was $47 billion in claims filed against ICE. And I'm assuming that each week is another set of claims that are being filed against ICE. So eventually, these claims that are being filed for this lawless misconduct of ICE agent going to see trillions of dollars. And the way this process works, I assume, Marlon, that the ICE claim is going to be similar to the Federal Tort Claims Act, where you file your claim and then you have to wait an administrative time period for them to investigate the claim. But do you have any inside information as to how these claims are being processed? Is there anything you think is done differently from the typical Tort Claims Act, Federal
Well,
Tort
there's a
Claims Act?
lot of there's a lot of litigation in Chicago, and in fact, there's a federal court judge that has been very vocal in terms of what ICE is doing. And your listeners should understand the person that is ahead of ICE. Okay, and it's Greg Baldino, according to the article in the Washington Post today, and you can Google and look at it online. There's a video of him throwing a tear gas canister into a crowd. And the problem the federal judge mentioned was that, hey, these devices should only be used where there's an imminent danger. And it's kind of like the use of force cases that you do, Attorney Lee. These shouldn't just be, a measure to punish individuals that are exercising their free speech rights. And one of the questions that was very pointed by the federal judge, he says, wait a minute, the video that I saw, the judge said that she saw, showed these canisters, near children in Halloween costumes and a Halloween parade. And she asked for a detailed response from Mr. Balvino regarding why this is happening. So there's quite a bit of litigation. There's a number of different ways that you can challenge it. You can challenge it under the Federal Tort Claims Act, because the government is generally immune from suit. And the Federal Tort Claims Act is a waiver of sovereign immunity. So before you file your claim, you have to file a claim administratively, and then you have a right to file in federal district court. So that's one way of approaching it. But you can approach it as a regular, improper use of force, and that's how a lot of these claims are being, litigated. And the claims are being litigated because it appears, at least from some of these lawsuits, that this is an attempt to stifle individuals' free speech rights to protest. Now, the government, his argument is that, hey, we're here to protect the federal function of enforcing the immigration laws. But the court is saying that, hey, yeah, you have that right, but the manner in which you do it, has to meet, constitutional standards.
And we saw that judge again call uh, Baldino into court last week and made some specific rulings, such as one, he wasn't even wearing his body camera. So she ordered that his body camera be on, period. And also that he report into her regarding his activities every day. But an appeals judge, Attorney Primes and Lee, you may be aware, they overturned that particular ruling, stated that that was too burdensome on him and his work. He also is required to give warnings before they administered any tear gas, or what are those? Do they call them rubber bullets, if you will, on, again, citizens that are exercising their fundamental rights of protesting. And it's really important that citizens continue to protest peacefully and safely. And but for the recordings that citizens are taking and making available to the media, um, these agents in Chicago would be operating with impunity.
Well, And Marlon, we need to go into this a little bit more deeper. The second part of this, the Federal Tort Claims Act is an administrative process. And the problem with the Federal Tort Claims Act is that the claims that I file by the time the federal government reviews it is typically taken, in my cases, about 18 months. They never do it like right away, the ones that I've done through the Federal Tort Claims Act. But you talked about the secondary aspect of filing, I guess, a Section 1983 type litigation?
Correct. So what can be done is that the claims that are being brought is that everybody in the United States, whether you're a citizen or not, has constitutional protections, and those constitutional protections include the First Amendment that our founders basically established, that the right to peacefully assemble. And so the idea that, someone is just indiscriminately, lobbing tear gas and rubber bullets is certainly disconcerting, because as many of you all may remember, from protests in the 60s and, in other instances, hey, rubber bullets. I mean, there have been cases where they've shot, people's eyes out, and caused other significant injuries. So this is kind of a misnomer that this is harmless. These things, go very, very quickly and move very, very quickly and can cause pretty significant injuries. So the point of the matter is that, when you use that type of force, it can't just be indiscriminate. It can't be because you're upset that, someone is protesting. It has to be, at least according to the federal judge's preliminary ruling, hey, there has to be, some danger or some concern regarding safety. And she was not seeing that, in the responses that the government was provided in court. At least at the trial court level, the federal trial court level, opposition to what ICE is doing has been very successful. The question is going to be, the U.S. Supreme Court is really inserting itself in a lot of these cases through a shadow docket. And what that basically means is that the normal way things get to the Supreme Court, as it goes to the trial court level, which is the federal district court, then the federal circuit. And then if there is a split in the circuits, in other words, two different circuit courts of appeals have difference of opinion, then the Supreme Court resolves that. What the Supreme Court is doing now, which is so unusual, is that they're basically, taking these cases on an emergency, and without, a lot of proper briefing, a lot of, indication as to why they're ruling the way they're ruling, and then just basically using themselves as almost a super federal district court. They should only intervene in emergencies. And, there's a concern by a number of legal scholars that, they've really broadened the instances where they use this. Typically, these are situations where someone's about to be imminently executed, where they may weigh in. But, they're, making this standard so large that they're saying anytime the administration is inconvenienced, that is this TRO preliminary injunction standard of irreparable harm has been met, which is not consistent with the applicable case law.
And you're absolutely right, Attorney Lee, regarding the Federal Tort Claim Act. In fact, it requires, under normal circumstances, that an administrative process be followed initially in bringing those kinds of cases. The several suits have been filed in Illinois against ICE and the Department of Homeland Security. And the primary suit, which was just filed this month by the ACLU and MacArthur Justice Center, is a class action suit. And there's several allegations. It's a class action on behalf of detainees at the Broadview ICE processing facility, which is the town where the Black Hawk helicopters descended in the middle of the night and hauled out African Americans and others, and children, and used zip ties and subjected the residents of that building to horrific anxiety and stress. and the key allegations in this lawsuit are inhumane and unlawful conditions. Detainees report overcrowding, denial of food, medical care. They're being denied a private bathrooms, denial of the right to access their counsel. Our representatives, Tammy Duckworth and Dick Durbin, our two senators, um, they tried to tour the facility and have not been allowed to gain access along with other public officials. And this lawsuit also alleges that many of the detainees are being, forced into signing paperwork that they do not understand, relinquishing their rights, um, and they are facing deportation without proper legal counsel, all in violation of their Fifth Amendment right to due process and the First Amendment right to legal counsel. Now, the guise under which um, the administration and the Department of Homeland Security is using for establishing these facilities and these raids on Chicago neighborhoods is that they're rooting out, gang members and criminals, and they talk about um, um, uh, sexual criminals, etc. But the number of actual criminals that they have apprehended in terms of numbers I've seen is a, drop in the bucket to legal citizens that have been apprehended and treated very poorly, thrown to the ground, tear gas and rubber bullets, only to be released later, with absolutely no accountability. So it's horrible what we're seeing happening here in Chicago.
Well, there's another legal conundrum regarding this issue that I need to share with everyone. Let me tell you how dysfunctional this process is. Say, for example, yesterday you had an accident with a person who's an undocumented immigrant, and say they have car insurance. They were able to get car insurance, and they caused the accident. Meanwhile, they get in the database, and so ICE goes and apprehends that person. And that person, once he's apprehended, you know what happened to him? Nobody knows. They disappear. Now, why is that a problem? So even though that person may have had car insurance, there is a cooperation clause in the car insurance policy that requires them to assist the insurance company in the evaluation of the claim. The problem that is this, and I'm encountering this on several of my cases now, is that the person who has insurance, who caused the accident, their whereabouts are unknown. Once ICE apprehends the person, we've not been able to track down where the hell the people are. So the insurance company send letters out, and they send letters out and say, what? Well, you're not cooperating, so therefore we're not going to provide insurance coverage. So it's not the fact that ICE is taking away undocumented immigrants. They're causing a major disruption in accountability in our justice system. See, our system was working fine on this landscape. If a person who's undocumented caused an accident, the insurance would take care of it, or we conduct a trial. They're able to appear. But now, this process is so dysfunctional until when ICE get involved, we have been unable to track the whereabouts of the defendant. And more importantly, there's no communication between the insured and their insurance company that would allow for appropriate coverage. So folks, when you see all this crazy stuff on TV, that could directly affect you and your well-being, even though you don't know that person, but that person caused an accident and they get deported. Then all of a sudden, you're in it by yourself. Unless you have your own uninsured motorist coverage, you may not get compensated for your loss. So that's one of the side effects of this idiotic methodology that they're employing with ICE. They indiscriminately are taking people in the legal situations. They should have at least considered the fact that they're causing harm to ordinary citizens in America by these disruptive action.
Wow.
Now,
Yeah, I agree. The other thing related to that issue is, you know, if we don't, speak up and at least let our voices be heard, it's only going to get larger and expand. As many of you may have seen, when the president was on his trip to Asia, and was asked about, the ICE raids, he basically indicated that he could use the Army, the Navy, the Marines, and send them indiscriminately into cities. And he says, I could, use an act which many reporters on CBS News and other media outlets, inferred, meaning that he being President Trump was going to use the Insurrection Act, which gives him a lot of powers. So we have to really be careful that this isn't just idle complaints. This could really lead to martial law and really a deprivation of rights. So again, it's just, so important in terms of your listeners to really understand that Tuesday is voting day. Politicians do pay close attention to that. And if there's low voter turnout based upon, all the, very egregious things that happen, people are just going to keep on doing them. So it's really important that, in fact, everybody exercises their right to vote and be heard.
yeah, big shout out to the folks in Virginia and New Jersey. Make sure you guys call your neighbors, your friends. I was watching, this is off topic for a second, because I was watching this debate between Spamberger and the lieutenant governor in Virginia. And I'm watching this, and the lieutenant governor in Virginia seemed like an absolute nutcase to me. I mean, it was so, well, it was such a dysfunctional debate. And it was just shocking to me that this person is running for governor of Virginia. Then I watched part of the process in New Jersey, and you got a guy who is a Trump supporter who's not discussing Trump. And every now and then he says something that to me sounds like it's overt racism. And so I think that more than anything else, the folks that are listening, if you have relatives in those states, make sure they get out and vote, because this election is midterm election, or this off-year election is important. It needs to set the tone for what's going to occur in 2026. And we get a chance to take the country back again. Now, let's go to the cell phone. Carl, you have a question or comment for us today. Go ahead. You're on mute. Hello? Okay. They're not responding. Okay. Okay, our caller's not responding.
Well, that's candidates. Go ahead. You go ahead.
Go ahead. Caller, what's your question?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Guy calling. Good morning to everybody.
Good morning,
Just wanted to say that I just heard about a program this morning on an earlier show on the station called Winning Experience, and it deals with focusing on the U.S. Constitution big time, particularly with the HBU colleges and universities. And it might be something that listeners might want to check out. It's winningexperience.org. Also, I think it's important that in these times, when you're talking about insurrection and acts and whatnot, that more attention be paid to what they call legal orders of the service members, the military, and exploring what those legal orders involve and what can be a legal order that can be obeyed and an illegal order which can be disobeyed.
Well, Guy, the problem we got now, uh, we have a country that is being run by a person who's tantamount a dictator. In essence,
Absolutely.
they're showing these attacks on boats out in the Atlantic Ocean, right? And so somehow somebody decided that it's okay to drop bombs on fishing vessels that they deem to maybe carrying drugs, right? Now, we know that Venezuela doesn't make those type drugs, fentanyl. Those are made primarily in countries like China. And so I watched a TV blip about this. They were saying that we're going to get rid of fentanyl. I'm thinking, you're bombing people in Venezuela for fentanyl for drugs that are made in China? You know, whatever happened to due process of law? We're going to kill people first for thinking that they may be carrying some illegal narcotics. I mean, that to me is an act of murder in which somebody should be held accountable. So people should go to prison for that. So even though I feel that the military people get an order, I think that that should be deemed an illegal order. And I think that if they do that, they should be held accountable because it's legally wrong and it's morally wrong. There's 100% probability that you're going to murder people that are innocent. But in our country, what is the essence of democracy is this concept called due process of law. That is, that if you accuse of wrongdoing, you have the opportunity to defend yourself. But if you are murdered on an assumption, then those rights are abrogated. So the point is that this process that they're normalized on the media, folks, is wrong. Dead wrong.
Yeah.
And also there are people even in this country that do not have clean hands when it comes to the illegal drug industry. You have a lot of industries that are businesses that business people that are profiting. So we need to look at the whole picture.
Again, we've moved into an authoritarian form of government, right? And democracy is potentially hanging on by a thread. And these upcoming elections and midterms are going to be critical in terms of whether or not we'll be able to preserve our democracy. When the president says that we're just going to kill them, right? I mean, he comes on, you know, television and he tells, the people that we're just going to kill those drug dealers out there, on the ocean, and that's it. And so Congress is mute. We don't hear anything from them. We've moved into, as they stated in Project 2025, they are executing exactly what they've been working on for years. And we talk about a unitary president where all power is in the president. So we've moved away from the three branches of government approach where you've got, for checks and balances, you got the judicial, legislative, and executive branches. And this is class textbook authoritarianism. You dehumanize the other party. You stack the courts. We've seen that with the Supreme Court. You demonize the press. You, of course, demonize the other party. And you stoke fear in the people. And we're seeing, with our own eyes, the U.S. military being weaponized against the people in total violation of the U.S. Constitution.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You know, our military leaders, and I had an opportunity to represent the branches of government when I served as the assistant U.S. attorney. I couldn't have been prouder of those generals and admirals when there was political speech that was given. It was really inappropriate, where they called all the military, generals and admirals from around the world to hear basically political speech. None of them clapped. And that's very important because it's very important that the military be perceived as nonpartisan. They're not Republican, Democrat, or independent. They're there to serve. And I think Attorney Lee, you're absolutely right. Within that context, the military is trained that they cannot follow, illegal orders. That's what Nuremberg was about after World War II, that an illegal order cannot be followed. That's what Rwanda was about. So we have to learn the lessons of history and really remind our leaders, and also remind our military leaders of the importance of nonpartisan, because we look at places like Arlington National Cemetery and our military cemeteries. These folks that are there that pay the ultimate price, they're not Democrats or Republicans. They came to serve. And we have to always remember that the important part of democracy is that, they're not a special force for any administration. They're there to serve the entire country. That was one of the, problems as it relates to what happened in Germany, that the military was deemed a vehicle of the administration. And we see the disastrous consequences. There has to be a separation.
Yeah. Okay, Carly, you have a further comment? Is it Guy?
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me. Quick couple of points that I wanted to make, and then I have a question for you guys. I wanted to point out about the New York City mayoral race and how the New Jersey and the Virginia races tie in, and it's basically that they all have the same message. It's about affordability. It's about accounting for all the people of their states and how we can get through this economic challenge and this political challenge. So I think they're all going to do very well, even though people are suspecting that New Jersey is going to be kind of close. I don't think it will be. And that's my personal opinion. But as far as New York City is concerned, because I live in New York City, Zadami has got this. There is nothing Cuomo can do at this point. So it's pretty much a sealed deal. The other comment I wanted to make about, that I'm not understanding why the administration feels like it's okay to not agree with the courts about SNAP. They're trying to buy more time, but that doesn't work in their favor, so I'm not understanding that. And the last thing is, I have a question for you guys. Is that
wait a second. You need to understand. The reason that you don't understand it is because these folks don't care anything about ordinary citizens. They can care less about poor folks, which is majority of his voters. These poor white Republicans, they buy into this stuff, but they don't really care about them. They care about rich people. And so the fact that you have some poor folks or people that need this assistance, really need it to survive, they don't care. It's just that simple.
So I'm going to rephrase the they. I don't mean the Trump administration. I mean the Republicans, because they're going to lose in the midterm based on their affiliation and their not caring about the people in their district. So I should clarify that. I agree with you that the administration could care less because they don't need them anymore. But, so the question I have for you guys is, so what do you think is going to happen once we get the Congress back? I don't know if it's going to be both chambers, but once we get the Congress back, what do you think is going to be, do you think the Democrats are going to go after those people who were complicit with illegal actions, like some in the military, some in the FBI, and some in the other administration? Thank you so much.
Well, that's a good point. See, what we're seeing is a high level of criminality. Every day when I watch these news feeds, it's just shocking to me as to what is occurring. So the federal government, one of the pillars of democracy is that there should be accountability. But every day there's a different level of criminality. So I suspect that they're going to have congressional and Senate investigations. If the Democrats win the House and Senate, they're going to be nonstop investigation. But that's what democracy is all about. We have to have accountability. At the same time, we need to have certain standards. The standards should include decency. The standards should include obedience of constitutional laws and rights of individuals. The fact that we turn this ICE into a destructive legal mechanism in our society is just wrong. And that's why there's so many lawsuits that are pending. By the time we reach 2028, I suspect that we're going to have more lawsuits against the federal government than any time in history if we combine all the prior lawsuits for the last 200 plus years. The way these lawsuits are, they're spiraling out of control. Our Justice Department will be overrun with lawsuits and claims.
And it needs to be. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to point out a couple of other things too. In the movement, there's a saying, no permanent friends, no permanent enemies. It's interesting that Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia is also coming around in terms of her constituents and the shutdown. And as I understand it, she's going to be on TV Tuesday on The View for people that might want to check that out.
Hey, wait a second. Hey, guys, something you need to know. I don't know if you paid attention to this. When the Republicans go back to their district, they've been yelled at, they've been cursed out, they've been threatened. So it's not her leading this effort. It's these Republican voters thinking they're getting the screws, and they're letting them know it because at some point in time, even the MAGA Republican realize that this thing's, like, for example, there's some things that are sacred. Farming, for example. Farmers have to have a process to sell their goods. So their crops need to be sold in a timely manner. The introduction of tariffs into the farming community has resulted in the inability to sell their crops. If they can't sell their crop, they don't have money to pay their mortgage and their loans and their debt. Therefore, they'll be out of business. 85% of these folks voted for Trump, right? So now the people that helped put him in office, they're going to be out of business come January 1st. And so,
absolutely.
So what you're seeing is a transformation in our political discussion now, in the sense that now the folks that are ardent supporters realize that support don't mean they have enough money to pay their bills. And now that hit home. When council talked about the Venezuelan deal, the $20 billion, I was watching an article that was showing that the $20 billion actually went to American corporation in Venezuela, who all gave money back to Trump. I'm not sure how true that is, but I didn't see a paper trail, but I saw this news feed on that issue. So the point is that those folks are hurting, just like most of us.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
And Attorney Lee, that money that went to Argentina, the $20 billion, what they did is they went ahead and cut a deal with China. There's no soybeans that China purchased from our American farmers, to your point about, our need for support to pay their bills and what have you. They bought billions of dollars last year. Argentina took that money, and their soybean crops were less than our crops, and they sold billions of dollars to China. So, yeah, it doesn't really make any sense in terms of, how this played its way out.
Always watch the money.
I have one last question for the attorneys, and then I'm going to hang up. Quick question. So do you think that after this is all over, that there could be civil suits from different states to the federal government for harm or, whatever to the citizens of that particular state, and that we can sue for the fact that they got rid of SNAP for so long and this and that? And now I'm going to hang up. I just was curious about that legally.
The suits now to that effect.
Yeah, Marlon, maybe we can tackle that.
Yeah, I mean,
There's
it's really hard to sue the federal government. There's limited ability. So, I mean, some of these things may be a discretionary function. There is a lawsuit that's going to the Supreme Court as it relates to the ability of the federal government to put on tariffs. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce has come out against the administration in terms of tariffs. So we'll see how that case plays out.
I anticipate there'll be lots of lawsuits, and there currently are lots of lawsuits. We talked about this one today, where the lawsuit demands that the Secretary of Homeland Security, the Department of Homeland Security, the Customs and Border Protection, and ICE stop flouting the law um, inside the Broadview detention facility. It was somewhat different than what our caller Renee is talking about. But I would imagine that anybody that has been physically injured, that there are lawyers that will be able to come together to bring some type of class action to demand accountability for physical and mental and other injuries that have been sustained by the citizenry, which have are documented through um, video recordings that citizens are taking across the country.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for injuries, I mean, you're certainly going to be able to file a lawsuit. I was speaking to the question of, other things that may be deemed a discretionary function that you may not be able to sue for. But, the Supreme Court is going to, basically, decide whether or not the use of tariffs is consistent with our constitutional system.
That
And so, as it relates to that narrow question, we'll just have to see, what the court does.
absolutely, Attorney
now for
Prime.
all our listeners, next weekend we'll be off because in honor of the Veterans Day. And so a big shout out to all the veterans across the country. And we'll be back in 2 weeks. And so I thank our guests for calling in and our superstar panel.
Thank you, Attorney Lee and Primes. Have a great weekend.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.